Okay, good afternoon, colleagues. My name is Mary Thompson. I'm one of the education officers within Education Scotland, and I'm really delighted that you're joining us this afternoon for the webinar Outdoor Learning with a focus on social studies. I'm delighted to be joined by colleague Mark Irwin, who will be kind of manning the chat pane. You can see Mark waving to you there. And also Lynn Robertson, who's the Senior Education Officer for Social Studies, waving to you too. And Sarah Smith, who is from the Royal Highland Education Trust. And we're really pleased that Sarah, and there's Sarah waving too, so hopefully you can see her too, has come along to share with you kind of ideas, tips, hints and resources that should be helpful to you in thinking about social studies and outdoor learning. So as we have said, the first part of the webinar is going to be recorded, and then we'll have time for kind of questions towards the end of the webinar. So if you've had a chance to fill in the registration form, that would be really much appreciated, and we can pop that into the chat again for you to have a wee look at. So what we thought would be really helpful was just to give you a kind of update of where we are with the guidance for outdoor learning and for visits. And there's a link there which we can pop into the chat round about the latest Scottish Government advice and guidance about taking learners outdoors, either in the kind of local excursions, school day visits, or indeed residential visits, and moving forward into international education visits when that's allowed. So if you haven't had a chance to have a look at that, it is term 4 now, so you might want to take a kind of wee moment to become familiar with that, and obviously think about the local guidance from your local authorities. So as I say, we're going to think about this in sort of 2 parts. First of all, Lynn is going to share sort of an overview of social studies and the opportunities, followed up by Sarah. So I'm going to hand over to Lynn now, and we're delighted that you'll take us through and share your experience and expertise with us, Lynn. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. It's really good to be here this afternoon. As Mary said, I'm the Senior Education Officer in Social Studies at Education Scotland, and to trade I'm a geographer. So outdoor learning is in my blood. I continually say geographers were the first outdoor learners before anyone else had thought it was a good idea. So, but I would say to you that the opportunities for outdoor learning go right across the social studies, and taking children outdoors can really enhance the experience and really increase the enthusiasm and the motivation for learning about social studies. And one thing I'm really passionate about is that taking learning outdoors isn't just collecting information outdoors and then taking it back to the classroom. One of the things that it's clear is that children learn better if they actually do some of the discussion and the analysis outdoors as well. So it's not just about that collecting data and then taking it back. Mary, could you move on a slide for me? Thank you. So we're going to look at history first. And the great thing is that history is all around us. Even if you are in the middle of a fairly new housing estate, you can still use that as a situation for history. Regardless of your school situation, you might be anywhere. You could be in the middle of a city, you could be in a rural area. But the great thing about it is you can use it as a comparison. So wherever you are can be a comparison to where the topic is that you're perhaps looking at. So if you're looking at the Victorians, you could be outside comparing housing. You could be looking at pictures of Victorian houses if you don't have any around you, and comparing them to the houses that you have in your local area. How were they built? Are they built in the same way? Why were they built, and when were they built in your local area? So there's lots of questions you can ask when you're just out on an exploring walk. The other thing is to try and think about the big questions about your local history. Sometimes there are great local characters, local historians, and the Storytelling Centre in Edinburgh are very good at linking you up with local storytellers, and it may well be that you could contact one of them, obviously making sure they're appropriately checked, but it might be possible to go on a walk along with them, or perhaps with a parent or grandparent who has lived in the area for a long time. And the young people find this really exciting sometimes to speak to someone who knows things that they've never thought of. The other thing I would encourage you to do is to take topics outdoors. I spent quite a bit of time working with the Outdoor Centre in Millport. And one of the things we did one day was to make a Viking longboat out of cardboard boxes. And you could do that in a playground if you've got no green space, you don't need it. You can do it in a yard. It does require the collection of cardboard boxes and occasionally kind of hassling your colleagues for some as well. But the really good thing about it was you could actually lay it out and the children could see just how big it or how small it actually was, and get an idea of how tight living conditions were, particularly because you were living with your animals in a way that description just doesn't give you, but it's a very simple way to do it. If you don't have cardboard boxes, you can lay it out in chalk. You can draw your Viking longboat outside and get the children to draw their own Viking longboat outside, and then to divide it up for where their animals would be and where the living space would be, and work out how they might use it. So there's lots of possibilities for the different history topics as well. Mary, would you move to geography for me? So yes, geography, the original outdoor learners. There are so many things you can do with geography outside. Land use surveys are probably going to be a theme across the 3 different organisers for social studies, because you can do a land use survey that looks at physical geography. So is it a hill? Is it a river? What different parts of the landscape are in your local area that you can survey. But you can also survey things like shop types, or is it residential? Is it commercial? Is it vacant? And you can look at land use in particular areas. You can do traffic surveys. I used to tell my first years we were going outside to play with the buses, and we would position ourselves in different spots and we would do traffic surveys, and then we'd compare the kind of traffic that we got. Field sketching is a great thing to do as well. Now, my colleagues used to describe me as diagrammatically challenged. I cannot draw, but even children who can't draw can field sketch. And you can usefully, if you're willing to do it, you can usefully use mobile phones for photographs. Oh no, I really can't. You can use mobile phones for photos, and you can get them to draw the picture off their mobile phone if they find that easier. But some children find that kind of drawing of field sketching is easier than actually imaginative drawing, because it's factual and it's kind of copying. Mapping is a good thing to do as well, even if you only map the area around your school. So if you just walk around the perimeter within the school, so that you're not actually walking outside of it, but you can keep it inside, but you can do a map of the different things that you find around your school. So the houses across the road, or the garage across the road, or whatever things you've got round about you is quite straightforward. The other thing is the outdoor learning bag. Now, I think Mary's got photographs there. Maybe when I'm not presenting, I've actually got it beside me. These were great. This is something I stole. I absolutely admit I stole from Dan at Kindrogan Field Centre. And I've used it quite a few times now. And I don't laugh, but I actually use it with my son. He's 12. And the great thing about it is that it's not just questions. It's questions on different pieces of material. Rocks, stones, plastic, there's a rubber glove there, there's some fabric, and the idea is that children put their hand in and they take out a question, and you can see one of the questions there is, in 5 years' time, what will have changed? What features will have changed? And that leads you into a discussion, not just about the question you've asked, but it can also lead to a discussion about the vehicle for the question. So some of these things are plastics. They would take a really long time to degrade. Some of them are natural. So it provides an opportunity not just to talk about what the questions are, but also to talk about the vehicles for the questions. And it's really good because the things are tactile. So it's good for the children to be holding them and thinking about them as, and they could be in small groups. You could give them, split them up into 5 groups and give each group a question, or you can do the questions individually, but it's a really good way to get children thinking about different kinds of questions. The other thing that I like is the big question idea in geography. So if you're doing the weather, for example, now I have to say I've done this inside in schools where you literally couldn't get outside, and I've done it from a window. But the great thing is if you can do it outside, it's so much more effective, particularly with little ones. It gets harder as they get older, but take them out with a question. Clouds is one of my favourites. My family will tell you they've bought me books on clouds and all kinds of things. But it's a great one for Scotland because most days we have some. So you can take them out and you ask them, what are clouds? It's straightforward, what are clouds? And then it's about what questions do we want to, what do we want to know about clouds? And small children particularly have the most brilliant questions. I find with kind of, as they get a wee bit older, the questions are not as good because they're a bit more worried about looking cool, but younger ones come up with the best questions in this kind of situation. And then rather than taking those questions and going straight back into the classroom and trying to work out the answers, brainstorming the questions together as a class outside to see what kind of answers we might come up with, and then taking those answers inside and working out what's correct by doing some research is a really effective way to get children questioning and thinking about what's outdoors. Now, clouds is a really obvious one. You don't need any equipment. You just need to be looking up at the sky. And as I said, you can even do it indoors, but we are talking about outdoor learning. But you can think about questions like that for different kinds of things. I've seen people do it on trees, which is a nice one as well. So there's lots of opportunities there. Mary, could you move on for me? There are a number of resources I'll point you to today. The first of which is the Royal Scottish Geographical Society, who have quite a number of resources that have been made in partnership with myself at Education Scotland, and quite a number of these try to involve some outdoor learning, and also quite a number are voiced over PowerPoint, so they can be used by children either in class or at home. Mary, the next one. Green Space, there's some links there, and I think we might be able to put them in the chat, but opportunities for outdoor learning and having a look at how to learn in your local green space by, I think that's a, yeah, so Nature Scott, definitely worth a look. Mary, on to the next one. And the Sustainable Scotland resource from Keep Scotland Beautiful is another one that's definitely worth looking at, all about exploring your local outdoor spaces. So there's a few possibilities for geography. The next slide looks at modern studies, and I think this is the one that, oops, we've lost the presentation, that lots of people really struggle with in terms of outdoor learning, because you think about modern studies, you think about democracy, and you think about the kinds of things, learning about Parliament and learning about different things in modern studies. But there are things you can do. One thing you can do, if you can't go out at all, it's a great way to vote. So if you're having an election, or if you're having a debate about something, instead of doing your voting inside by putting your hands up, go outside, have some speeches, and then get the children to move around to vote, to move to different parts of the playground to express their opinion on different things. So physically moving around and thinking at the same time is a really useful way to do it. Modern studies in geography, population density is really good outside, because you can draw chalk lines on the yard, and then you can stand children together and show them what a high population density is like, or a low population density is like, and they get a much clearer idea of population density if they're actually physically doing it. The other thing you can do is you can look at your local area, connecting to businesses, so you can look at different kinds of businesses in your local area. You can, a nice project linking history, geography and modern studies is looking at the history of the buildings and the businesses in your local area, and mapping them, putting them on a diagram, putting them into your information, and you've then got a kind of project looking at what used to be in those areas. Has it been knocked down? Has it been renewed? So there's all kinds of possibilities for that as well. Now, a couple of more things I'm going to say are because I can't avoid an advert when given the opportunity. So I have recently created a national primary social studies team, and I'm going to share the code in the chat once I've finished presenting, and I hope you'd consider joining. One of the things that I'd like to do is have a space for advertising resources, for competitions, for events that are coming up that are specifically social studies related. And one of the things that's coming up on the 2nd of June is a webinar about people of medieval Scotland, and we're going to be looking at everything from early years right the way through to second level. And one of the activities there is for early level on building castles outdoors whilst looking at medieval Scotland. So these kinds of things I'm going to put on the primary national social studies teams page, along with a brand new resource which Education Scotland will have on its National Improvement Hub on second level landscapes, which I thought you might be interested in as well. Sorry, Mary, I just can't, the opportunity for an advert there was just too strong. But thank you very much.
That's fantastic, and I was so impressed, Lynn. You just kept going. Strange times. Apologies, folks. For some reason, the presentation stopped sharing there, but I'm glad I was able to bring it back to you. And thanks, Lynn, very much for that kind of contribution. Anything coming through from the chat page, Mark, that people wanted to kind of ask or pause to share at the moment?
There isn't anything coming through at the moment. I have posted a couple of the links there that Lynn talked about. The green space map, outdoor learning, actually just came from a meeting with the guys there. Some of this stuff from Nature Scot is actually getting refreshed, outdoor learning directory and things. It's actually looking really good how it is now. So great, Lynn highlighted them. There's some really good stuff. I love that green space map. My favourite filter on it is the 5-minute walk, which makes me sound very, very lazy, but it's actually just to do with, it's amazing to see how much green space is so local to you, so it's great. I just also highlighted within the Sustainable Scotland, the work in eSchool that again Lynn mentioned. There's within the link I've put in there that there's some sort of highlights of the march that we did. One of my favourite lessons, in fact it's the one that I have highlighted, was actually on population density in refugee camps. It was a maths lesson, but there's the power of it for me was, and I've said this to many people, there was a maths lesson that brought me to tears in a very different way that maths lessons used to bring me to tears in school. So I'd recommend checking that out. And I just love suddenly that link with what Lynn was talking about with modern studies and sustainable development goals and maths and numeracy. So check that stuff out. So that's great. And Lynn, just to highlight as well for everyone, within the camp, there's the code for the Primary Social Studies National Team. Any questions or any comments, stick them in the chat and we'll come back to them. Thanks very much, guys.
Great, so now we're going to hand over to Sarah, who, as I said, is from the Royal Highland Education Trust, and we're really delighted to hear from Sarah this evening, who's going to take us through some really exciting opportunities that are available to us within Scotland. So Sarah, thank you for coming along and joining us, and we'll pass over to you now.
That's lovely, thanks Mary, and welcome to everybody. I'm just going to talk you through some ideas that can link food and farming to social studies. So like Mary said, I'm Sarah. I work for the Royal Highland Education Trust, and our remit is food, farming and the countryside. Next slide please, Mary. Right, so we basically offer 3 different things. We offer resources, we offer classroom speakers, and we offer training. So I'll quickly go through these 3 things and then we'll see how we can link it into the E's and O's. So we offer resources, I'll move on to this shortly, whereby you can go onto the website and we have a number of different weight clips with different materials in them, and we also have a resource portal that you can search, and it's all linked to the E's and O's that you might be teaching. We can also link you up with a classroom speaker. So a classroom speaker is a farmer or someone who works in the countryside or someone who's really knowledgeable about food farming in the countryside. And we can organise for them to either come into your class, or at the moment we're also doing them remotely as well, to talk to your class about how food is produced and how the countryside functions and works. And we also deliver training. So we do teacher training on a whole range of different topics. A lot of it's linked to food sustainability, food production, and how land's managed. Although we're not doing them at the moment, we also deliver farm visits. We're hopefully going to be recommencing with them in September. And these basically get kids out onto a farm so they can see firsthand how food is produced. As well as visits, we also do food and farming countryside days. And these are days where there's a lot of different activities going on and groups of kids circulate round and find out about a variety of different topics. Next slide, please. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to work through the different components of social studies and give you hopefully some ideas about what you can do in your own school grounds. So starting with wool. So obviously we have a lot of sheep in Scotland and there's a lot of history behind wool linked in to potentially the Highland clearances, and there's things you can do with wool related to sheep. We can provide wool if required to help doing things like felt or making mulch mats in school. There's also a link here to how crops are produced. At the moment, we grow wheat, barley and oats in Scotland. There is a possibility to grow wheat next to grass and look at what the differences are. We have a project called Grow Your Own Loaf, and through this project, you can request free wheat seeds for your school. The next window for requesting wheat seeds is going to be in September time. And linked to this, there's a Wakelet, and in the Wakelet, there's the ability to record how your wheat's growing and submit that to a database. There's also the option to see a number of different videos, and there's sheets on there around how to bake bread as well. So it's a whole package. I'll pop the link into the chat when I've finished talking. But that project is open to anyone who wants to get involved. And then there's also the opportunity to do stuff around potatoes. So lots of different varieties of potatoes are grown in Scotland, lots of different colours. You could link this into potato famine and the history of the potato in Scotland, plant different varieties, put them in different situations, in light, out of light, and see how they grow. So there's a bit of an experiment going on there as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so a lot of you may already have weather stations. So I don't know whether you've ever thought about linking weather to what grows where. We have a map. This presentation is all linked. So when it's circulated, you can click on the map and go through to this map on our website. You can link the weather to what grows where. So obviously the West Coast is slightly wetter than the East Coast, and that dictates what we grow. And moving on to that, you could, following on from Lynn's earlier idea, chalk out a map of Scotland in your playground and lay out different crops or different vegetables to highlight to the kids where they grow. And you can see quite clearly that things like grass grow really well down in Dumfries and Galloway. Carrots, for example, they like to grow. There's a lot of carrot growing in the Aberdeenshire area, and you can get the kids to put the right crops in the right place on the map. There's also linking into maps mini field activities that you can do, whereby you have metre squared areas and plant a certain number of seeds in an area. And there's calculations you can do around how much crop you should get back from that particular area. So for example, I think you plant something like 89 wheat seeds and get back something, you calculate back how much you get. And there's a worksheet linked to that too. And just good old grass. So if you don't want to plant crops or do anything like that, grass is a fantastic resource and there's a lot that can be done around it. So all the meat that we produce in Scotland, if we didn't have the grass, we wouldn't be able to grow that. So you can look at the life cycle of grass, you can look at the different species of grass, you can make your own hay, and you can also do grass measurements. So even if you've got just a wee patch of grass, there's something that you can do. Next slide, please. And this just links back into some of the things I've just mentioned in that last slide. So the image there with the coloured dots, that shows you a map from the James Hutton Institute of where different things were growing. And the Scotland image, this was a map of Scotland actually created, and real vegetables were placed on it, and it just highlights where different things grow. Next one, please, Mary. Okay, so this is a really good website if you're looking to find where your nearest green space is. So it might be that you don't actually have any green space within your school grounds, but that doesn't mean you can't do things outdoors, because it might be that you're able to walk somewhere, and you can use this map to go on and find where your nearest patch is. It might be an allotment, a park, or just some space that you might not otherwise know about. So this is a really good map, and it's even worth, if you know your area quite well, popping in your postcode and seeing what's around, because there might be things that you weren't aware of. For example, I was working with a school in Kirkcaldy, and they had an allotment, but they had no idea it was there because it was in amongst the houses. So have a wee check and see what's on your doorstep, and you might be quite surprised. Next slide, please. And another useful website is this one here, where it compares two different maps of the same area side by side. And it's useful in that you get a good spatial awareness of what's around you, not necessarily for outdoor learning, but it gives you the bigger picture of what's happening in your local area. And again, it's hyperlinked if you want to have a look at that one when you get the presentation. Next slide, please. Okay, now anybody who knows me knows that I'm a bit of a geek when it comes to soil. I think soil is really, really important, and there's so many things that you can do with soil, and regardless of where your school is, you're going to have some earth somewhere that you can look at. And soil is so important for so many different things. It's the basis of human society, basically. Without soil, we wouldn't be here. So you can texture your soil, you can get soil keys, and you can get the kids out there actually working with the soil in their hands, a small piece, and by texturing it, you can work out whether you've got a sandy, silty or clay-based soil, and then using that, you can work out what the soil might be useful to grow. And then you can look at different maps. So there are apps you can download whereby you take pictures of the soil, and they will tell you what type of soil it is by the colour. And with the app, in collaboration with a colour stick, you can work out exactly what type of soil you've got. So texturing your soil, a really simple thing to do. You can also carry out worm hunts. More organic matter equals more worms, and stone surveys as well, if you want to maybe put a metre square and see how many different stones, and that gives you an idea of the physical geography in the area as well. So how does your soil compare to other areas? What might you plant in different types of soil? And again, technology to look at the carbon content. So soil is a whole resource. It's a fantastic resource, and it's under everybody's feet. What I would say is, if you're doing any of these activities with soils, just be very careful if you've got raised beds, because raised beds often get filled with either compost, which texture tests don't work with, or soil that's come from somewhere else, and it might give you an off reading if you're looking at different soil types. So just be a bit careful if you do use stuff from raised beds. And up at the top there, there's a link to a wakelet all around carrots. So this helps you if you work out what sort of texture you've got. Carrots, for example, like to grow in sandy soil. So that little wakelet there goes through how carrots are growing and on a commercial scale. And there's links in there to do recipes around carrots and the carrot life cycle from seed to plate. And again, that link's available shortly. Next slide, please. Right, yeah, there's also the opportunity to look at the environmental impact of human activity. So I don't know if anybody recognises that lovely little creature there. That's a New Zealand flatworm, and they are interesting little critters. They basically eat our earthworms by curling themselves around the worm and dissolving it, essentially. So they're not a great thing to have, but they are more than likely in your school grounds. They get here on the bottom of plant pots, and you can carry out surveys of your grounds to see if you've got these things. If you do have them, there's no real way of eradicating them, unfortunately. There's another little activity around invasive species called No Seeds Please, which gets you to walk kids through plant seeds, and then they have to count how many actually stick to the bottom of their feet, and it gets them thinking about how invasive species are transmitted. And you can also undertake hedge surveys. So even if you have a tiny stretch of hedge, you can undertake a survey, and the number of species in a hedge, particularly in older hedge, can dictate how old the hedge is. A lot of hedges now, it doesn't work so well because they plant species-rich hedges, but that gives you some sort of the idea of the activity that you can do around people, place and environment. So next one, please, Mary. Okay, so a couple of places to point you to. We've got a resource portal online which houses a whole range of different activities and resources. It's not just REP resources on there, it's resources from a whole range of different organisations which operate across Scotland. And on the other side of the screen, this is a crop mixture and food sustainability project that we've got running at the moment. And this is similar to the Grow Your Own Wheat project, but rather than wheat, it's a mixture of barley, vetches and beans. And there's links within that to the soil and undertaking surveys. It's aimed predominantly at maybe P7 upwards rather than younger kids, but it's a really good one to get involved with because obviously food sustainability is top of the agenda at the moment. And by looking at what we grow, we can try and work out how to make it better for not just food production, but for pollinators as well. So next slide, please. Okay, so this is just a bit of a slide about connectedness and how we need to try and look at the bigger picture, and by getting children outside as much as possible, we can try and develop a nature connectedness, and this is becoming really, really important. And it's not about being able to identify things to species level. It's about being able to get kids to use their senses and connect to the natural world. And there's so many opportunities to do this, and we need to be making the most of them because there's such a disconnect at the moment whereby kids just aren't connecting with the outdoors, and setting this up so that they can do is going to be vital moving forward. So hopefully some of these activities have given you ideas about how you can reconnect, but just it's got on so many different levels for health and well-being and being aware of where you are. Like I say, it's about giving them the opportunity just to sit there and engage with their surroundings. And next slide, please. Okay, so we've got a couple of different events coming up if anyone is interested. Outdoor Classroom Day is coming up, and we've got an event around citizen science where we're going to be going into a bit more depth about that soil sustainability and crop mixture project I was talking about, and that's happening this Thursday. And we've also got a Let's Get Outdoors event on the 17th of June where we're getting people to do lots of hands-on activities. So if you want to know bit more about how to make your own pots and some activities to do around trees, etc. in schools, then that's open for booking now as well. So there's so many opportunities and I urge you to try and get out there and engage as much as possible. And I think that's our final slide, Mary, please. Yeah, so if you want to know more, that's the link to the REP website. If you're interested, we also do a teacher newsletter whereby we keep you updated of any new resources or events that might be coming up. So thanks for the opportunity to talk today, Mary, and if anybody's got any questions, do feel free to pop them in the chat.
That's great, Sarah. So thank you very much for that. It's really great to hear just kind of the rich opportunities across soil, crops, bread, maps, etc. I remember being at university and doing a kind of project around potatoes and how they would grow just exactly as you articulated. So really kind of nice one to engage with. And thanks so much for signposting some great opportunities coming up. Colleagues, we are aware that people did submit kind of questions, so we've gathered these together and we'll explore these towards the end of our session. We're just going to move forward now and have a little think around some possibilities. Mark, are you able to share this inspiration for us? Is it working, or are we going to share a link afterwards?
Well, the sound isn't working again. Unfortunately, it's something to do with, I think, presenting through Edge when we're using Google, and unfortunately we don't have Chrome on our works machines, but I can play the film if you want to talk over it.
So we'll give that a miss, colleagues. So I think I was really kind of inspired as we were thinking around. Lynn's talked about the importance of getting outdoors. The same with Sarah there. And just as I popped into the chat, this week obviously is Mental Health Awareness Week, and the theme is kind of nature. And during the lockdown experience, I took a walk just around my local environment. And was just really struck in a way that I hadn't been struck before about the kind of number of bridges. And when we think about outdoor learning, we think about social studies. Lynn really beautifully articulated the fact that we can do that in an urban environment as well as in a rural environment. And for me, bridges was just something that kind of just came to me, that there's so many bridges around us, and it was a kind of inspiration for learning. So there's a little a kind of collection of photographs and a wee podcast that we can happily share with you after the event, so you might be inspired by bridges, their form, their structure, their strength, their power, their connection with different places. You may be inspired. I certainly was, and we can share that with you.
I think, Mary, if I can come in there as well. So Mary, as you said, film, and what was fascinating when looking at the film, because unfortunately we can't hear Mary's commentary, but as you highlight, so there's all the different structures and the different materials. So I guess thinking perhaps some of the engineering, some of the STEM round about that. But actually for me, it was the stories that actually the bridges represented. So there was a lot of stuff I found interesting about who built this bridge, who designed it, and thinking about actually, well, why is this bridge here? And I thought there was some really interesting stuff about, I guess, industrial heritage. And I loved a lot of that, and actually and patterns and all sorts of stuff. So we will post that video once we get the audio working. But just to highlight, I think it was a really great, interesting way of looking at some of these things. And obviously a bridge joins one place to another. And again, I think there's something quite lovely about the narrative about that. So once it's posted, you can see it as well, and I think you'll like it. But I pity you can't hear it now.
Well, we hope you like it. You may not. Lynn's popping in the chat that 2022 is the year of stories. So this kind of work could be really good. Like, that's really good for that heads up, Lynn. So thank you for that. We wanted to share with you, if you haven't seen it already, we created probably quite near the start of lockdown, an outdoor learning wakelet and learning for sustainability wakelet, and if you click onto it, it comes up with kind of a whole range of resources and websites, and it's not just what you see there. There's, if it says kind of different items, you can dig further into it, and hopefully it'll provide some useful learning resources and points of reference, including the ones that have already been pointed out to you this evening. A couple of things that we maybe wanted to kind of draw your attention to that obviously link with the theme of social studies are some suggestions from the wakelet, and there's a bit of kind of virtual tour guide on how you can use digital technologies and digital apps such as QR codes to think around creating perhaps a tour for those in your community, or indeed thinking about mapping, micro journeys or measuring microclimates are just some of the examples, and you can access them all through the wakelet or indeed some of the websites that have been referenced for you. Sarah's already kind of flagged up to you the opportunities that come with Outdoor Classroom Day. It's only just, we can have outdoor learning every day. There's no reason just to save it up for a particular day. But should you be looking to sort of encourage practitioners who are perhaps less confident with that or don't know kind of where to start, there's some really helpful resources available through that website, and we'll be sharing that again through kind of Scotland Learns. So look out for that too.
Can I just say as well, Mary, so next Thursday, obviously Outdoor Classroom Day. I'm not sure if anyone's from Murray, but I'll be delivering a webinar for Murray, looking at outdoor learning next Thursday, part of Outdoor Classroom Day. So if anyone is from Murray, drop us a wee message and I'll make sure that you're invited to that.
That's great, thank you, Mark. We're going to just highlight another couple of things for you, and then we'll pause for sort of questions and comments and kind of general chat in response to the questions that people submitted beforehand, or indeed just questions and wonderings that have come up for you as our presenters have been sharing. So we're obviously kind of keen to share with you some other outdoor learning, professional learning experiences, and outdoor learning is one of the pillars of learning for sustainability. There'll be a lot more opportunities coming your way in the coming session. If you haven't seen it before, together, Mark and I have kind of run a number of these before, and the hyperlinks will all be available to you post-event. And again, we've got another couple coming up at the 26th of May, and I think it's the 9th of June for an early years focus specifically. What we're going to do is pop in the evaluation link to that in the chat, but we're going to then move on to exploring the questions, and we're going to just pause the recording here and just kind of have an opportunity for an open forum and a conversation. So colleagues, just before I finish the recording, just a huge thank you from me and Mark to yourselves for coming along this evening and giving of your time after a busy day in school or in an early learning and childcare setting or in the community. We're really grateful and appreciative of you giving of your time for that. And to our two speakers, Lynn Robertson and Sarah Smith, really huge thank you from us to you for sharing of your knowledge, your expertise, your time and your suggestions. So colleagues, thank you very much. I'm just going to end the recording there and we'll move on to the question and answer sort of session now. So thanks, colleagues.